When learning another language, many people believe grammar matters most and vocabulary is secondary. This is a myth because in real life, vocabulary is often the difference between succeeding and failing to communicate. In 1988, an English teacher took a job at a university in Urasa, a small rural town in Japan, so small that it had only two tiny food stores. On his third day, he suddenly had to make homemade biscuits. All he needed was one missing ingredient: flour. He had studied basic Japanese, two writing systems, common expressions, and basic grammar patterns. As he walked to the store, he confidently practiced the pattern. "Excuse me, where is the feed? D's." In the store, he couldn't read the kanji on packages. He found clear plastic bags filled with powders, but he couldn't tell. Was it flour, cornstarch, baking soda, powdered milk? He tried strategies, synonyms, definitions, explanations, even drawing. But he didn't have the vocabulary to explain what flour was. And you can't really draw flour. He tried. "I want bread. I eat bread." Then, "No, not bread. Before bread." His grammar was impressive. Even the phrase "before bread" was grammatically correct in Japanese. But it made no sense to the shopkeepers. By coincidence, one of his students walked past the store. He shouted, "How do you say flour in Japanese?" The student answered with hina, which means flour. The shopkeepers happily led him to the produce section, to a display of chrysanthemums. He didn't get flour, no biscuits. And he realized something important. All his grammar knowledge was useless in that moment. What he needed was one word: kamugi. Vocabulary would have solved the problem immediately. Learning a second language includes vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, writing, reading, culture, even body language. But traditionally, vocabulary has received less attention than almost any other area, especially compared to grammar. For more than 2,000 years, foreign language study focused on grammatical analysis and translation. As a result, vocabulary was often excluded from curricula or treated as an afterthought. Even today, many ESL textbooks lack vocabulary lists and vocabulary indexes. Programs commonly offer grammar classes and reading classes, but almost never vocabulary classes. For too long, people assumed learners would pick up enough vocabulary without direct instruction. One quote summarizes it perfectly. "Without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed." Adult language learners consistently report vocabulary as their greatest difficulty. And it's telling. People don't carry grammar books around. They carry dictionaries. Research repeatedly shows vocabulary knowledge strongly predicts reading ability. In fact, lack of vocabulary is often the biggest obstacle for second language readers, more than reading strategies or syntax. Studies also show that a larger vocabulary base supports writing quality and improves listening and speaking performance too. Even when teaching moved from grammar drills to communicative methods, vocabulary often stayed in a secondary role, used mainly to fill gaps in grammar exercises. As vocabulary research expanded, education began swinging back toward more explicit instruction, asking not whether to teach vocabulary, but when, how, and which words. Recent research explores questions like, how many words do learners need? How vocabularies develop over time? Why some words are harder? Whether context learning or direct instruction works better? Which learning strategies students use? Which activities promote learning? And how tools like glosses, the internet, and dictionaries affect acquisition. Publishers have started responding to demand for vocabulary materials. Some catalogs still show more grammar books than vocabulary books. But the gap is narrowing, evidence that vocabulary-focused resources are rising. First, understand how much your students' comprehension depends on vocabulary. For many learners, the key is comprehensible input, language at their level, plus a little more. This is sometimes called I plus is 1. To make input comprehensible, slow down, speak clearly. Avoid reduced speech like, where ya from? Say the full sentence, where are you from? Use simple vocabulary. Avoid phrasal verbs, idioms, slang. And if learners don't understand, repeat the same words first. Don't paraphrase immediately. A surprising example of comprehensible input? The movie Home Alone, where the main character repeats questions slowly while thinking, using controlled vocabulary and clear pronunciation that works well for learners. Second, become more aware of how vocabulary problems derail learning activities. A task can fail, not because learners can't discuss, but because they don't know essential words. A teacher brought a short baseball newspaper article, only about 160 words, to spark discussion. But students couldn't discuss at first. They had to stop repeatedly to ask vocabulary questions. Even one short paragraph contained many essential unfamiliar words, blocking comprehension and conversation. Here's a crucial distinction. Content-related vocabulary is the topic words in the text. Task-related vocabulary is the language learners need to perform the activity. I think. I agree. Could you repeat that? Why do you think that? Without both sets, discussions flop. Third, choose materials that emphasize vocabulary. Teachers don't always have time to build vocabulary lists and retrieval practice from scratch. So pick resources that already provide vocabulary presentation and practice. And tell publishers you want more. If you use websites, match the level carefully. And if possible, use sites that email results to both teacher and student, showing visits, time spent, and scores. It sends a clear message: vocabulary matters. Fourth, include vocabulary on quizzes and tests, not only reading tests. A basic principle of good testing is to test what you taught, the way it was taught. When vocabulary is on assessments, students see it's valued, and they become accountable for learning it. Even grammar quizzes can include new vocabulary. For example, astronomy, biology, zoology. Why is astronomy different? Use not in your answer. This checks grammar, while reinforcing vocabulary and meaning. Grammar matters, but vocabulary is the foundation. In real life, one missing word can stop you completely. So let's bust myth. Number 1, vocabulary is not less important than grammar. Without vocabulary, communication doesn't happen.